In the heart of Washington, D.C., nestled behind towering marble columns and high-security gates, the presidential palace stood proud and silent. Few knew the intricacies of its inner workings, and fewer still noticed the woman who moved quietly among the hedges and rosebeds each morning. Her name was Aissata. Every day, just after dawn, Aissata would arrive with a canvas satchel slung over her shoulder, filled with tools worn by time. She wasn't loud. She didn't mingle much with the palace staff. But the gardens, those were her world. She knew each plant as if it had a soul, whispered to them in a dialect none around her recognized. The tulips swayed a little softer when she passed. The jasmine bloomed brighter in her presence. Something about her aura pulled nature into harmony. President Ibrahim Traoré had never paid much attention to the gardeners. His schedule, tightly packed with briefings, security matters, and global affairs, left little time for walks. But that morning was different. A restless night, a yearning for quiet, had brought him to the gardens alone. He needed stillness, and the gardens offered it. At least he hoped they would. As he walked beneath an arbor of wisteria, he noticed her. Kneeling beside a row of wild lilies, Aissata moved with an elegance that made the flowers seem like mere apprentices to her grace. Her face, partially shaded by her headscarf, was striking not for its beauty alone, but for its familiarity. Traoré slowed his steps. His heart thumped once, then again, harder. Something about her profile tugged at the edges of his memory. He stared longer than he should have. She looked up briefly, nodding in respectful acknowledgement before returning to her work. A single strand of hair fell across her cheek. It was the same shade as his mother's. He dismissed the thought. The mind plays tricks, especially when wearied. Still, something lingered. He continued his walk, distracted, but the image of the gardener stayed with him. By the time he returned to his office, her face had embedded itself into his thoughts, like a melody half-remembered. That afternoon he asked one of his aides, "Who's the woman working the East Garden?" The aide blinked, surprised by the question. "Aissata, sir. She's been here for nearly 3 years." "Where's she from?" "I believe she listed her birthplace as the Sahel region, somewhere near the border of Burkina Faso." Burkina Faso. The words rang in his ears like a chime struck too hard. His homeland. The land of red earth and golden sun. The land he'd fought for, bled for, and led into a new era. And now, a gardener in the heart of the American capital spoke to flowers in a dialect he hadn't heard since childhood. Coincidence, he told himself. A trick of the mind. But doubt began to root itself in his thoughts like ivy on stone. He returned to the garden the next day. This time he approached her. "You handle these lilies well," he said, trying to sound casual. Aissata looked up, a flash of curiosity in her eyes. "They remind me of home," she replied, her accent subtle but unmistakable. "Where is home for you?" he asked. She paused, then answered softly, "A small village, long ago lost to time, near Kaya." Kaya, his birthplace. Traoré's breath caught, but he smiled politely. "Thank you for your work," he said, retreating with practiced diplomacy. Behind his composed exterior, memories were flooding back. A whisper of a girl's laughter in the wind. A promise to assist her before the soldiers came. If stories of identity and lost connections move you, don't forget to subscribe. This is just the beginning. The day after their brief exchange, President Traoré sat in his private study, unable to concentrate. Reports blurred together, and advisors' voices faded into static. His mind kept circling back to the woman among the lilies, Aissata, with her soft voice and that unmistakable accent from home. He ordered a discreet inquiry, not a background check in the traditional sense, but something quieter, respectful. He wanted to understand without alarming her. The results came swiftly. She had arrived in the US under a humanitarian program, worked as a florist, then quietly found her way into the palace staff. Her records were clean, her conduct impeccable. But what stood out wasn't in the paperwork. It was a photograph taken during her security clearance process. In the photo, she was younger, eyes wider, with a faint scar above her brow, one that sent a jolt through Traoré's memory. He had seen that scar before. He remembered the accident, the panicked scream, the blood, and the cloth their mother had used to stop the bleeding. That night he barely slept. The following morning, Traoré found himself walking to the gardens earlier than usual. Aissata was already there, pruning roses. This time, he didn't hesitate. "You mentioned Kaya yesterday," he began. She glanced up, unsure where this was heading. "Yes, it's where I was born." He crouched beside her. I was born there too. My family lived on the eastern ridge. My sister, she disappeared when I was 9. Aissata's hands froze. There was an attack, rebels, we fled, I thought she was dead. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind rustling through the trees. My parents never spoke of it, she said eventually. I only remember running, fire, and being carried away. Traoré's heart thudded. What was your name, before? She hesitated. It was Aminata. His breath caught in his throat. That was her name, he whispered. Her face turned toward him, searching his eyes for deception. Instead, she found tears. I never forgot her, he said. Not a single day. I don't know what to believe, she replied, voice trembling. So much of my past is just fragments. I was raised by strangers, moved from place to place. He nodded. I understand. Memories can be traitors, but some things, some truths don't fade. Over the next few days, Traoré found excuses to return to the gardens. Each visit peeled back another layer. Aissata spoke of lullabies sung in a dialect only their mother used, of a carved wooden toy shaped like a lion that she remembered clutching tightly in her sleep. He described the toy down to the nick on its leg. She smiled through tears. One afternoon she said quietly, I had a dream once. I was walking through a market, and someone called my name, my real name. I turned, but no one was there. I woke up crying. He reached for her hand then, and she didn't pull away. They weren't sure yet. There was still doubt, the kind only truth or time could dispel. But something was blooming between them, fragile and real. A recognition deeper than proof. At night, Traoré sat in his chambers, sorting through old letters, photographs, anything from before the war. One image, faded and creased, showed him as a boy, arms slung around a little girl with bright eyes and a small scar just above her brow. He held the photo under the lamp's glow and whispered, "Could it really be you?" And in his heart he already knew the answer. The uncertainty began to wear on them both. As much as their instincts whispered of a connection, neither Ibrahim nor Aissata dared to fully trust their hearts alone. Too much time had passed. Too much pain lay buried beneath years of silence and displacement. They needed more than memories. President Traoré called upon a trusted physician, someone with experience in forensic genetics, and made a private request. The man didn't question him, but the gravity of the task was evident in his eyes. Samples were taken discreetly from both Ibrahim and Aissata. No need for palace gossip or public speculation. While waiting for results, Ibrahim withdrew from several public appearances. Behind closed doors, he immersed himself in records from his childhood, family trees, old hospital files, refugee reports, anything that might offer clarity. Some documents were inconclusive, others too damaged to help. But then came a breakthrough. A former aid worker from the conflict zone responded to an inquiry Ibrahim had submitted weeks before. She remembered a girl, around 6 years old, found wandering near Kaya during the height of the rebellion. The child had no name, spoke little, and was eventually placed into a relocation program. The report noted a faint scar over her brow. When Ibrahim showed Aissata the document, she read it slowly, silently, and then clutched it to her chest. Her eyes welled up, but she said nothing. Some truths sink so deeply into the soul, they need no words to take root. The DNA results arrived 2 days later. Identical markers, full biological siblings, neither of them cried at first. They sat across from one another in stunned silence, as if the earth had shifted under their feet. Then Aissata reached out, and he took her hand. The weight of decades lifted in an instant, neither could explain. A bond broken by war had been reforged, not by fate but by perseverance. Yet joy wasn't the only feeling that came rushing in. There was grief too, raw and heavy. Grief for the years stolen, for the family dinners that never happened, for birthdays missed and childhood spent apart. Aissata spoke of the loneliness that had haunted her even in safety, of looking at strangers and wondering if one might be kin. Ibrahim confessed that for years he had tried to erase his past. Leading a nation demanded clarity, strength. He buried the boy he'd once been. But now the ghost of that boy had returned, bringing with him the sister he thought he'd lost forever. The revelation didn't stay private for long. Whispers spread through the palace like wind through leaves, and then a leak. By morning, the headlines exploded. President Traoré reunites with long-lost sister in palace garden. From war to the White House, a family reborn. The world reacted swiftly. Social media flooded with reactions, hopeful, curious, skeptical. Some praised the emotional reunion, others questioned the timing, searching for political angles. But none could deny the sheer human weight of the story. At a press briefing, when asked directly, Ibrahim stood still for a moment before answering. "She is my sister," he said simply. "We were torn apart by war, by chaos, and now we are whole again." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Behind him, Aissata watched from a distance, hands clasped tightly. For the first time in years, her name meant something again. Not a file, not a refugee number. A sister, a survivor, a symbol of what was lost and what could still be found. In the days following the revelation, something shifted inside the palace. The halls felt warmer, the silence less oppressive. Aissata was no longer a shadow among the flowers, she was family. And for Ibrahim, each encounter with her felt like a thread being stitched back into the fabric of his identity. They began spending time together deliberately. Morning walks through the garden became ritual. Over coffee and late dinners, they shared fragments of memory. He told her about the village games they used to play, the taste of roasted yams on festival days, and their mother's songs, low and melodic like prayers whispered to the stars. Aissata remembered the melodies. She hummed them back to him, halting at first, then stronger. They laughed over things once painful. She told him how she used to braid grass into crowns and pretend she was a queen, waiting for her brother to return. He confessed that he'd built walls so high, he never thought anyone would reach him again. "I always thought I was alone in the world," she said one evening, her voice soft beneath the glow of the lanterns. "But now I know I was only waiting." Reconnection was not without its struggles. There were cultural divides to bridge, beliefs and routines that had grown apart. But both approached it with patience, as if learning a new language they had once spoken fluently. Politically, the reunion stirred a ripple across continents. Media outlets followed every step, dissecting motives, predicting implications. But Ibrahim remained grounded. In a televised address, he stepped up to the podium, not as a president, but as a man who had regained a piece of his soul. "My sister is not just family," he said, his voice measured but steady. "She is a reminder of what war takes and what peace can restore." The message resonated deeply. Citizens back home sent letters by the thousands. Stories poured in from those who had lost family during the conflicts, people who had long given up hope. For many, Ibrahim and Aissata's reunion became a symbol of possibility. Moved by the outpouring, Ibrahim took action. He announced the creation of a national initiative focused on reconnecting displaced families, offering access to DNA testing, refugee tracing services, and psychological support. Aissata, newly emboldened by her place in the world, volunteered to help lead it. Her poise and quiet strength captivated the public. She began speaking at small gatherings, sharing her story not with grand speeches, but with raw human truth. Her presence grounded the project. People saw not just a policy, but a face, a voice, a survivor. Back in the palace, their bond continued to grow. They hung an old photo of their childhood on the wall between their offices, a reminder of who they had been and who they had become. Staff who once walked past her now greeted her warmly. She, in turn, learned their names, their routines, their struggles. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the gardens blushed gold, Ibrahim turned to her and said, "You've brought life to more than flowers here." She smiled, tucking a jasmine bloom behind her ear. "And you've given me back my name." For both of them, healing had not come as a dramatic gesture, but through slow, steady rediscovery. The past could not be undone, but it could be honored. And in doing so, they were shaping something new, something whole. Months had passed since the truth came to light, and the palace no longer felt like a fortress. It had become, in many ways, a home. The story of Aissata and Ibrahim had circled the globe, not just as political curiosity, but as a testament to resilience, reunion, and the quiet strength of human connection. Aissata's presence was no longer incidental. She had become a symbol. Without seeking it, she was now recognized in public. Her words quoted in classrooms and newsrooms alike, but she never let it change her. She still rose early, still visited the garden, still moved with the same quiet purpose. At Ibrahim's side, she began to take on a ceremonial role, introduced at functions as the first sister, an unofficial title coined by a journalist that had somehow stuck. It suited her. She didn't speak often, but when she did, the room listened. There was power in her stillness, in the lived truth behind her words. The national program for family reunification flourished. Thousands came forward, looking for brothers, mothers, children. DNA clinics popped up in towns that had once been forgotten. Aissata made personal visits to some, speaking with families, listening to stories that mirrored her own. Her empathy brought comfort. Her example gave hope. One morning, standing before a crowd of students at a local school, she said, "You are more than what the world has taken from you. You are what you choose to become, even after the loss." The applause was quiet at first, then rising, thunderous. In private, she and Ibrahim continued to rebuild what had been lost. He showed her the books he used to read as a boy, now preserved in the palace library. She brought him gifts from small shops, spices that reminded them of home, beads like the ones their mother used to wear. One afternoon, she placed a hand on his arm and asked, "Do you still see the boy you were?" He looked out over the garden. "Not always," he replied. "But when I do, I see him holding your hand." The years they had been apart could not be reclaimed, but the years ahead stretched vast and open. Together they had not only mended a bond, but created a legacy, one born not of privilege, but of pain transformed into purpose. As they walked the garden paths once more, they passed a new addition, a small stone plaque beneath a tree. Etched into it were the words, "For the lost, the found, and those still searching." It was Aissata's idea. That night, as they stood before a gathering of ambassadors and leaders, Ibrahim offered closing words that transcended borders. "We are not defined by our titles or our history alone," he said. "We are defined by our choices, and today we choose to heal." The crowd rose in unison. After the applause, Aissata remained behind a moment longer. She looked out at the sea of faces, then up at the sky. For the first time in years, the stars felt close. If this story has moved you, if it's reminded you of the power of love, of family, of hope, don't forget to subscribe. And before you go, click on the video waiting for you on screen. There's always more to discover, and the journey never ends.